The Fantasy Fullback Dive is thrilled to welcome back now for the fourth time senior NFL draft analyst for the Draft Network and co-host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, Mr. Trevor Sikkema at Tampa Bay Trey. Thanks so much for joining again, man. How you doing today?
Dude, it's awesome to be on with you once again. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't thought a lot about fantasy football up to this point. I've been like recapping the draft class and all that kinds of stuff, but when you DM me and you're like, hey, you want to come on? I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I started researching these questions that you had for me. And it got me super excited,
Yes.
about the fantasy aspect of this upcoming season. And so it's great to be with you, man. This was like my moment. Every year I have a moment that's like, all right, now I'm turning the page. Now I'm getting really into fantasy football. This was this moment for me, so I'm glad to be on.
I'm happy to help provide that moment. And it's been a weird offseason because usually you're so used to great news coming out in training camp and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, yesterday was kind of that moment too with the Damian Williams just opting out of nowhere. So, I mean,
Yep.
I know this, and just to preview the agenda here, we're going to be breaking down the rookie wide receivers here. That's the focus. But holy shit, I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire now with no Damian Williams in front of him. I guess before we get into the rookie receivers, and this is off script completely, but what do you think he's just going to light it up there in Kansas City?
This will not be the last time I bring up Clyde Edwards-Helaire's name. I'll just kind of say that. I'm super excited for him. He was my RB1 coming out of a very talented running back class. And for him to go to the Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, I already thought it was a match made in heaven. Yes. Now, I don't want to give anything away because there's some questions at the end, some rapid fire questions we're going to go through that I'm going to bring his name up. But I'm excited to say the least. It's weird. I know we were going to already kind of get into this situation with COVID-19 and the season coming up, and it's really weird. And you don't want to be too excited, right? Because it's the reason why we even bring up this question is because of unfortunate situations that Damian Williams is now opting out. And so it's kind of a bummer how all this stuff is coming to be. But in that sense, we're at this point where a lot of new names are going to get these opportunities to make a name for themselves this season that they weren't going to have previously. So where it sucks why we're here, it's definitely a chance for some of these guys that we weren't going to get to hear their names or they weren't going to get the chances they were before. It's a good opportunity for them.
I know it's so hard to not get sentimental about it because you do feel for the people opting out and the fact that they can't play, the passion there. But at the end of the day, points are points on my fantasy team. I hate to sound like a scumbag in that sense, but it is the truth. And as you're saying, there's going to be a lot of guys stepping into that. I guess we just dive in right there as you preview, COVID-19 and the impact on rookies. No OTAs, no mini camps, no type of preseason. How worried are you guys for their ability to make an immediate impact just in general here?
Well, it's going to be tough. And I think, those draft fits that we talk about, on draft night, I really like this guy because his skill set works really well with this team. A lot of that is based off of what we have seen the previous season. Mm-hmm. And we're not sure exactly what new wrinkles were going to happen in 2019 or 2020. We know that offensive coaches, they've always got something up their sleeve. They've been scheming over the summer. They're ready to introduce a new position that they're really looking to emphasize and things like that. So when we talk about scheme fits, we look at what a team was doing in the previous season to say, okay, this guy complements what they were looking for in this regard. Sometimes it's a one-on-one thing. Sometimes it really works out. Other times you're looking for emphasis players. I mean, take Deebo Samuel last year. We all knew that Deebo Samuel was really versatile, but the fact that he got in with Kyle Shanahan and Shanahan was able to emphasize him in really unique ways that nobody really saw coming, the amount of versatility they were going to have with Deebo Samuel. It's kind of with that example. And so with no mini camps, with no OTAs, it's going to be a lot harder for guys to just really step in right away. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think that those draft night fits that you talked about a couple of months ago, those are going to mean a lot more this year than in years past because you're not going to have as much time to get that chemistry down to really acclimate with what's going on. Instead, you're going to have to get what a guy does really well and just plug them in right away. And some guys that'll be advantageous for, other guys it might take a little bit longer. So as we go through this season and we see I feel like there's going to be more rookie, I don't want to say rookie slumps, but maybe the rookie numbers won't be as good as they have been in the past, but of those guys that are succeeding right away, take them aside and the players that you just need to be more patient with after that, if that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. And that's kind of what we're going to be looking to break down here is how do these guys fit, what skill sets, what are their strengths, and, which ones of them are going to be lined up for an immediate role, whether they're going to be ready for it or not, whether they slump at the beginning or not. That's going to be kind of the goal here with these rookie receivers. And that's kind of the toughest position, right? Like running backs is kind of sometimes plug and play. Jonathan Taylor knows how to read blocks. He's going to be behind one of the best lines. Like that position, I'm not overly worried about. But receivers building the rapport, getting the whole complex playbooks down, and that could be, a little trickier. But ultimately, you say if they fit the scheme and they had a clear target in mind, Kyle Shanahan, run after the catch, things like that, then we could still see some nice translation and find some good values because you're seeing, I know you're just getting into the fantasy game, but you're seeing rookies drastically fall in rankings right now. And there's still some really good talent. Like we'll get into the players and where they're falling to as we go here. But man, I think it's presenting some nice buying opportunities, to be honest, especially with the ones that are going to fit really well. In that sense, just for redraft, not for Dynasty right now. So just this strange year, this could be a slow start. There's still some that could fit in really well, as you highlighted. So if you were going to kind of make a top 5, 8, whatever list you want to cap it off, how would you kind of, and we'll dive into them, you don't have to break them down quite yet, but how would you kind of rank these guys for your redraft fantasy rankings right now?
Okay, I'll do you better. I got 10 guys. I listed 10, so I came up with a top 10. You said top 5. I went with the top 10 because there's guys that I definitely want to talk about.
Even better.
So I'll go 10 to 1. I won't explain too much because, like you said, we'll dive into them in a sec. But 10, I got Brandon Aiyuk. 9, I got T. Higgins. 8, I got Michael Pittman Jr. 7, I have Bryan Edwards. 6, Henry Ruggs. 5, Justin Jefferson. 4, Jalen Reagor. 3, Laviska Shenault. 2, CeeDee Lamb. 1, Jerry Jeudy. So, that's how I would break them up.
Wow. So, there's definitely some names we have to make sure we hit there.
Yes.
Wow. That's an exciting list. Does that change at all for you dynasty-wise? I know that was redraft, immediate impact. Are there any guys you would have had significantly higher or lower if you're looking just more longer-term format?
I think maybe for dynasty, I might have Chase Claypool might sneak in there because he's a bigger guy and Pittsburgh doesn't exactly have his skill set right now. So if he succeeds well, that's an easy opportunity for him to take that and run with it. Antonio Gandy-Golden in Washington, now that Kelvin Harmon is down, they're going to need a guy to show up as kind of like a true X, like that red zone kind of threat. Gandy-Golden could be that guy. So that might be, if he gets early playing time and he succeeds really well, that might be something that plays to his advantage. I'll tell you, T. Higgins is probably another one because you figure A.J. Green, it's his last year there. I know they got Auden Tate, but still, they invest a higher draft capital in T. Higgins. If A.J. Green is out, they probably want T. Higgins to become that A.J. Green guy for Joe Burrow. So I feel like he might go up a little bit. As for the other guys, I mean, they're pretty high, and it would just depend on, CeeDee Lamb, I feel like could be a wide receiver 1 on a lot of different teams, but Amari's going to be there for the foreseeable future. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not sure how much, they'll have enough to make it work, but I don't know how much higher I would put CeeDee Lamb, if I would put him as my 1 in that situation. So those are probably the guys that come to my head immediately that I might move a little bit higher because of their situations. Honestly, though, it really wouldn't change too much because of what we talked about earlier. There's just a lot of uncertainty right now in exactly how it's going to shake out.
100%. So in that sense, we're just going to start diving in. I almost want to adjust it a little bit based on your rankings, but we'll go with what we have here. I kind of just listed the guys in the order they were drafted for now. And we're not going to be able to hit every name most likely because there was 13 taken just in the first 2 rounds alone. And so while we get to these guys, just kind of thinking about what they do bring to the table, their strengths, what they're going to bring to these offenses, and then their short and long-term impact is going to be kind of the general gist of every question here. We'll start at the top. Henry Ruggs, kind of surprising as the first wide receiver, and Oakland was among the most wide receiver needy teams. 3rd lowest with only 211 wide receiver targets, 2nd lowest in wide receiver target share at 43%. So as expected, they go at 12. Just a little surprising that it was Henry Ruggs and not some of the other guys most people had higher. So, why do you think that was the case, and how do you think he's going to fit in here short and long term?
So of the 3 wide receivers that were kind of talked about as who could be wide receiver 1, there was Henry Ruggs, there was Jerry Jeudy, and there was CeeDee Lamb. I had Henry Ruggs as my wide receiver 3, but I was as transparent it could be that, like, if you had Henry Ruggs at wide receiver 1, I'd barely argue with you. If you had CeeDee Lamb as our wide receiver 1, I'd barely argue with you. The reason why I had Jeudy as my wide receiver 1 is because the skill set that he offers right away will win in the NFL. Like, his floor is so unbelievably high unless he somehow just forgets how to catch a football. You know, like, the way that he wins, it's automatic. Like, this is automatic success in the NFL, and I think he's got the long speed and the deep ball experience to also bring that to the table. That's why I had him as my wide receiver 1. But in terms of Henry Ruggs, him going number 12 to the Raiders, I almost said Oakland, Las Vegas, it makes sense when you look back at what both Mike Mayock and John Gruden were saying in the offseason. We have to get more dynamic. Like, they were like, we need more dynamic weapons in the passing game. And Henry Ruggs is a true top receiver. I want to make that clear too, because a lot of people were like, oh, you know, he's the speed guy. He's John Ross. He's going to flame out. You know, like, he might be like a Will Fuller type where he's just all speed, and once he gets hurt or once physicality comes, he's not going to be able to take it, blah, 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 which I don't think is true of Will Fuller. Yeah. Just wanted to make that clear. But Henry Ruggs presents like top tier wide receiver abilities as a guy who could do it all. Like, he could catch through traffic. He's a tough son of a gun. He's smaller of a wide receiver, but I think that he could take on, you talked about target share a little bit there. It's not just this guy that they're going to have run go routes and that's it. Now, Derek Carr, according to Football Outsiders, he was about a middle of the pack deep ball accuracy thrower. He was just below 50%. I think he was at 47. And so that's kind of encouraging. You hope it's a little bit better with Ruggs even there. But all that to say, I think it might take a little bit longer for Ruggs to produce the way that he could, depending on how they play him. If they just want this guy to be like a deep ball specialist for them to really stretch the field, it might take some time for him and Derek Carr to really get it together. Like, that kind of his game might not show up until year 2 or year 3. So it might not be something as a rookie that we see right away with Henry Ruggs. And that's why I have him lower on my redraft rankings. But like in dynasty rankings, I could see him being a guy that's, you know, for sure in my top 5 or something like that, because I know how you use him. And so I think he's going to be the primary target getter for the Raiders. It just depends where those targets are coming from, how they're manufacturing them for him. Because if they want them to be more deep ball based, you could do that. He's got the speed. He's got the separation. He knows how to do it. But we all know that sometimes takes a little bit more chemistry to get down. So that's kind of my thoughts on Henry Ruggs going into his first year.
Man, I do hope they manufacture those touches much more efficiently than just a deep artist. As you're saying, he's fully capable of it. And Gruden, before last year, I mean, he had a long track record before he kind of came back into the league of just peppering one guy: Tim Brown, Keyshawn Johnson, Keenan McCardell, Joey Galloway, Antonio Bryan.
Joey Galloway was the big one. I remember that one.
Yeah. I mean, he was peppering these guys. I think it was like 12 straight years, or all 11 straight seasons. I have it right here. All of them went 1,000 yards or more. So, I mean, if that role, when that role happens, you know, Ruggs is equipped for it. Who knows if it will be immediate? You know, they were reluctant to take deep shots last year, but man, it could be a thing of beauty if that's the case. And you mentioned Jerry Jeudy, your number 1 guy, teammate there. You know, the next one off the board lands in Denver. They have Cortland Sutton, a nice wide receiver who really took a great step last year, but still, there was really no one behind Sutton that was a clear-cut guy to be in that lineup. So it seems like a pretty glove-like fit. You know, you already mentioned some things you love about Jeudy, so in addition to that, you know, how do you think he's going to fit in Denver with that skill set he's bringing to the table?
Yeah, I think that this works out so well for them, and you can tell from this past draft class that they had that their entire mission was to get weapons around Drew Lock. Like, they are all in on trying to allow Drew Lock to be as successful as possible, you know, because they draft Noah Fant high last year, and then they draft another tight end, who has kind of a similar profile in Albert Okwuegbunam, right? And so, you know, they draft Jerry Jeudy. He's big time on separation. They also draft KJ Hamler, who I know we're going to talk about in a little bit, who is a great separation kind of player. And so you have Sutton as that X guy on the outside. And you like that because he was the steady force. He was the big body. He was the guy you could go to. But Jerry Jeudy's another go-to option in a different way. I talked about his footwork and his route running being so precise and that being such a high floor in the NFL. that can be the best friend of Drew Lock, who is coming into his sophomore year, and you're trying to avoid that sophomore slump. We often talk about tight ends as the quote-unquote security blanket players of old. That's how it used to be just a couple of years ago, where these were the guys that you had them come off the line of scrimmage, you had them run like a 5-yard curl route or an out route or something like that, and after the quarterback went through maybe his first or second options, he could always dump it off to the tight end, and that was an easy completion that could get yards, that could keep things going. Now you can do that with Jerry Jeudy, and since Noah Fant is so good at attacking the seam and getting vertical, you don't have to have a player like Noah Fant stay in and be that like security blanket kind of guy all the time. Now you can free up Noah Fant because of how reliable we think Jerry Jeudy's going to be with his route running, whether it's in the slot or to the outside. I mean, if you put Jerry Jeudy in the slot and you give this guy two-way goes, he's going to be cooking even the most experienced slot cornerbacks all day, just because he is so good at what he does. And so you talked about it being, a glove-like fit, him being able to come in right away. That's what I see too. Jerry Jeudy was not only my number one wide receiver, he's one of my number one fits in the entire NFL draft because of how he is going to affect this offense and how he is going to open things up for Courtland Sutton, for Noah Fant, and for Drew Lock as he scans the field.
I mean, you're painting a picture here of an offense that's going to be very tough to stop as long as Drew Lock can distribute that ball. Are you looking at Drew Lock as like a potential monster in fantasy if he can, with all these weapons around him? Or what do you think of Drew Lock? Is he going to be able to unlock all these guys?
Yeah, look, I obviously love the live arm. When he was coming out through the NFL draft, you loved that potential of him. I'm not ready to do any predictions, but I am ready to set the stage and kind of say, like, look, it's on Lock right now. At this point, I know this offense is young. Like Sutton's obviously in there. Jeudy and Hamler are two guys who are rookies coming in. Okwuegbunam's another rookie coming in. Noah Fant is there. It's just his second year. They've got Melvin Gordon that's coming in. They've got Phillip Lindsay, who they know they can lean on. The offensive line should be a little bit better. They added Lloyd Cushenberry, who I thought should have been drafted a lot sooner than what he was. You're hoping Dalton Reisner rises to the occasion, full pun intended, and then Garrett Bowles stops committing so many penalties, right? All of that to say, when you ask for a Drew Lock prediction, the ceiling is about as high as Lock can take it, right? And that was the whole point of, I think, what they were doing this offseason, is that as much as Drew Lock can progress, they have the offensive blueprint to match him all the way. And so I don't know what we're going to see in Lock, because he was a volatile player, right? I mean, he did have a fun arm, but a dangerous arm, And so that's what his narrative was coming into this season. And so I say all that to say, like, if Lock gets things under control, if the light really comes on for him, they've got the weapons around him for him to really succeed this season.
I love the take. And he's also going at like quarterback 23, 24 right now in average draft position. So at that point, you're looking around 13, 14. It's kind of one of those, why not? Because if everything comes together, whether it can or not, we'll see. But that's one of those situations where, like you said, the ceiling is as high as he'll take it. That's pretty deadly, especially in a Division II where it's shaping up to be some shootouts right there with the Chiefs, He might be a great candidate depending on how your roster is. Like, I know people don't always carry two quarterbacks depending on like how the league is, but if you typically in your league, however it is set up, get the stash a quarterback, then this might be a really great second half of the year QB. Like, if you don't take a QB early and you take maybe like a mid-round guy and then Drew Lock later, Drew Lock might be a player who, after the first 8 weeks of the season, it was a little bit of trial and error for him. This offense might catch fire in the final 8 games of the season. So he's a guy to definitely look out for, I think. Excellent points all around. The next guy that came off the board, CeeDee Lamb, he was my personal favorite wide receiver entering this class, and I was shocked to see him fall all the way to 17 of the Cowboys, who were already a pretty juggernaut offense. They led the league in total yardage last year under Kellen Moore the first year there. Jerry Jones said he needed CPR. He was so excited to see him there. Apparently they had him at like 6 overall, their number one wide receiver. Who knows if that's true or what, but still, it seems like they clearly love him and love his fit. So what do they love about him, and what are kind of expectations, even though it's a bit congested there? Could he still kind of carve himself out a role that's useful in year one? Yeah,
that's the big question. I know they ran with 3 wide receivers, 67% of the time. So 713 snaps they were running with 3 wide receivers anyways. Now they just get to do that, but with CeeDee Lamb. That's pretty crazy. So actually, I think combining all the personnel groupings that would have 3 wide receivers on the field, it was close to 70, maybe like 68,
yeah.
69%.
And Mike McCarthy, too, when he was in Green Bay, I think it was like 77%. He was always top 3, like for every year he was there
right.
in that personnel, yeah.
Cooper and Gallup, I thought, had awesome seasons last year. Obviously, they were big benefactors of Dak taking that next step. And, you said you were shocked that CeeDee Lamb made it to 17. So was Dallas, because this really probably shouldn't have been in the cards for them. Like, if Henry Ruggs or Jerry Jeudy were the ones who were on the board as the wide receiver 3, I don't think they make this pick, but they make it because it's CeeDee Lamb. And I think that they believe that he gives them full versatility to use any of those 3 guys however they want. And that's such a weapon week in and week out. Like, Cooper has enough route running ability to be played in the slot, right? CeeDee Lamb has enough yards after catch ability to give him 2-way goes, and it makes sense because you can get him the ball that way. Gallup is the same kind of guy who I think has been cross-trained a little bit there. I'm just worried that, all 3 of these guys are phenomenal, and obviously they had 2 1,000 yards receivers last year, but when you think about how Zeke is in this offense too, and know that they're going to run the offense through Zeke, I just don't know if there are literally enough snaps to appropriately get the ball to these guys as much as you would want for as good as they are. So I think that CeeDee Lamb is going to have a good year. I think it's going to be an efficient year. I just don't really know what it's going to be yet. It's another situation where however much they ask of CeeDee Lamb, he will be able to deliver for them. You know what I'm saying? Like if they decide that they want CeeDee Lamb to be the number 2 target getter on the team, I think you're going to get a great return on investment because he's a very talented player. But at the same time, you could see them in a sense go, okay, well Gallup and Cooper obviously have the chemistry with Dak, so they're going to be the normal 1 and 2, and CeeDee Lamb's going to be more of the 3 rotational guy in his rookie year, and we'll see what happens his sophomore year. His sophomore year could really be the year where he takes the league by storm. I wouldn't bet on it being this year, just because I think it's going to be a lot of sorting out. You like the fact that they're willing to go to 3 wide receiver sets. McCarthy there, I think, is a good fit. But I'd just be hesitant on how much you're going to get for him because there's just so many mouths to feed in Dallas. I think that it's a great situation if you're drafting Dak Prescott early. But outside of that, the individual wide receivers, really outside of Amari Cooper, who I know they're going to force feed the ball to no matter what is their wide receiver 1, it's really up in the air with those other 2.
That makes total sense. It just does seem like it is going to be one of those offenses, though, that doesn't really come off the field till points are on the board. Like, how do you defend that team? And I mean, as good as Dak was, the quarterback too in fantasy last year, as you said, like there's 5,000 yard potential here. We've seen some gems from Aaron Rodgers under McCarthy, so I'm with you there. It's tricky to figure out how it will all shake out, but I'm certainly looking at Dak as the guy that has to be on everybody's radar, the quarterback 3 in my rankings right now. Next up was Jalen Reagor. Kind of surprisingly, they pass on Justin Jefferson, so clearly they had something in mind when you had someone, pretty different profiles. Last year, no wide receiver on that team topped 500 yards, 6.5 yards per attempt when targeted wide receivers, was dead last in the NFL, as was 42% wide receiver target share. So, I mean, they clearly had a big need, and they go out, and this is the one they choose. So what do you think was driving that choice, and what do you think he's going to be bringing to this offense?
I think when everybody looked at Philly last season, they saw a group of pass catchers, tight ends included, with Ertz and Goddard, that struggled to separate. Like whether it was Alshon, whether it was J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, the 2 tight ends, like it was a bunch of guys who didn't really know how to separate. And that's not what Philly wants. Right. That may be why all of us pegged Justin Jefferson as like a great spot for them, because Justin Jefferson is a great route runner. He's a great natural separator. He can do that kinds of stuff. He's a slot player who I know Pro Football Focus had him very high. He might have been their highest slot graded player, or was it Tyler Johnson? One of the 2. I know Jefferson was up there. Either way, he's a guy that he really knows how to separate no matter what route he's running or no matter what alignment he's in. So a lot of people said like, oh, okay, that's what Philly needs. What Philly wants is to be dynamic. Like they want to be able to get the ball into speed players' hands. That's why they brought back Deshaun Jackson. That's why they still have him sticking around. That's why they drafted John Hightower in the later rounds. And, of course, that's also why they drafted Jalen Reagor. They want to be able to get the ball in his hands and let magic happen, right? They want to be getting it to him early and often. The same thing with Deshaun Jackson. That's really what they want. So I think that when we watched the Eagles struggle last year, we looked at their struggles and we said, okay, based off of their struggles last season, here's the type of wide receiver that they would go for. And that's why we pegged him for Justin Jefferson. In reality, it seems like the Eagles and their coaching staff went, we're taking this year, we're balling it up, we're throwing it away. Like, they want it to be an anomaly. They want the unfortunate injuries that happened throughout that team. They don't even, like, that's not even what they were trying to be. And so the struggles that we saw from last season, I don't even think was ever really, like, in the cards for them. Like, they didn't even want to look like that. So they weren't going to take the weaknesses of an identity that they had last year that they never even wanted to be as a reason to formulate a draft strategy. Instead, they just wanted to get faster. They wanted to get more dynamic. And Jalen Reagor is a guy who you can get the ball to him in bubble screens, on quick slants, mesh routes across the middle, things like that. And you could just watch him work because he is so fast. And he's kind of a complete receiver in that regard. He can stretch the field as well with his deep speed. So that's why I think they went with Jalen Reagor as opposed to a Justin Jefferson. And look, if we get a healthy Carson Wentz and a good offensive line in front of him, which Philly's been able to do over the last couple of years, and they stay healthy, which is the important part, I still think this has the chance to be one of the best offenses in the NFL.
I think that makes all total sense. I mean, you look at the last time they had like a genuine. I love the take that it's, yes, he's a great fit himself, but also how much he elevates everyone else. Justin Jefferson, a great talent, but might not have opened it up so well for the entire offense. You look just a few seasons ago when they, Torrey Smith was their lid lifter. They haven't had like a lid lifter, and Torrey Smith is nothing that special, but that's when Carson Wentz was on that just insane MVP style pace just a couple seasons ago. 33 touchdowns in only 13 games. I mean, he was lighting it up. So just the way this whole offense could look and operate at a completely different level. I mean, all the quotes from the GM since then have been, we want to take more vertical shots. We need to have that speed on the field. Like, I do think I'm totally in agreement that it's going to be a much different offense. And the fact that Carson Wentz was the QB9 with just this kind of, slow, ho-hum, no separation. Again, no wide receiver getting over 500 yards and still quarterback 9. I mean, his ceiling is also insane. And the path to playing time for Reagor is pretty open. Goodwin's now opted out, right? Like, he's opted out. Alshon Jeffrey is probably going to start in the PUP. So, I mean, who else is really in his way? Obviously, Deshaun Jackson, maybe JJ, but like, I don't know. It seems to me like he's got a very clear path. So I love the fit, and I love, like you again emphasized, what it does to this whole offense. It's going to be awesome to watch. But the guy they passed up on, Justin Jefferson, he goes next. The wide receiver needy Vikings gobble him up. They had 47.5% of their air yards up for grabs after Stephon Diggs left. That was the second most in the league. So how do you kind of expect this guy to fit in both early and down the road here with the Vikings?
Yeah, it's got to be – well – I think it's very tempting for everybody to say, like, oh, it's a 1-in, 1-out. Like great route runner in Stephon Diggs, great route runner in Justin Jefferson. That'll be super easy. If they were replacing Adam Thielen, I feel like it might be a little bit close to a 1-in, 1-out. But Stephon Diggs attacks the deep portion of the field so well. Like he was fourth in yards per reception last year, but he was second in yards per route run, I believe. I believe the only player who had more yards per route run was A.J. Brown, given some target criteria. And so he attacked the deep parts of the field very well, and that's what Stephon Diggs, I think, can do for an offense. Jefferson can do that too. You just don't want to, like, expect that out of a rookie. Like, you don't want to – you can't say, oh, 1-in, 1-out, this is something that you're going to peg in here. I love the fit. I love – Jefferson being in Minnesota, getting to work with a heavy play action offense. I think he's going to be a best friend on the field, if you will, to Kirk Cousins in a rushing attack that's clearly going to lean on Dalvin Cook. Hopefully we get Dalvin Cook this year, depending on a holdout. But, all that stuff to say, him and Adam Thielen, I think, is a really good 1-2 punch. You just never know with rookies. It's going to be a different speed. LSU was on a different level than everybody they played last season. And you're not sure whether or not it was truly just because these guys' individual talent bases were on a different level than everybody else, or if it was just like as a whole, like the offense as a whole was running as a well-oiled machine better than everybody else, because we'll be able to see that pretty quickly in Justin Jefferson's tape. But in terms of what he does really well with his route running, with his ability to be a good two-way go player, I think he's going to fit right in Minnesota. And I think you talked about path to playing time for Jalen Reagor. Path to playing time for Justin Jefferson, I think, is pretty clear as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it all makes sense. It all lines up. It's just a matter of how fast that one translates. Brandon Aiyuk, the next guy that goes, and according to Kyle Shanahan, he was their top-ranked wide receiver. Who knows if that's actually true, but he trades up, he goes and gets his guy, shows that it was someone he clearly coveted. And now you also got Deebo Samuel down. He could miss some regular season time, according to John Lynch, just this week. So without anybody else, Emmanuel Sanders is now gone. It's a pretty uninspiring depth chart. Talking about clear paths to playing time, I mean, that seems like a pretty clear one. Do you think Aiyuk could make an immediate impact here?
Yeah, they clearly love him, right? Mm-hmm. And it makes sense why Shanahan and company would really love Aiyuk, because this is a player who you can get the ball into his hands early, and he's a creator. Like, he is great after the catch. He's dangerous when he's moving behind the lines of scrimmage. He's a good ideal flanker type player, like a Z guy. And those players are the ones that Shanahan loves to get his hands on. Deebo Samuel was one of them last year because you can move him around so much. You can use him as a mismatch a lot. The key, though, is you can move him around when you have an X receiver that you can rely on. When you have a guy that you can place on the line of scrimmage to deal with the press coverage really well, which frees up the other guys, the Deebo Samuels, the potentially Brandon Aiyuks, to move around the line of scrimmage, to play in the slot, to play off the line, to not have to deal with press coverage. That's going to be what I think they miss the most with Emmanuel Sanders, because Sanders, I think, has been one of the most underrated wide receivers for a long time. And Sanders, for as speedy as he is, as much as he can attack deep down the field, as nice of a route runner as he is, he's also a player that knows how to deal with press coverage, I think. Yeah. And San Francisco, throughout the season, was afforded the luxury of not only playing a really good wide receiver like Emmanuel Sanders out on the field, but also as an X. So putting him on the line of scrimmage then could free them up to use Deebo however they wanted. And when you give Kyle Shanahan ultimate creativity with a guy like Deebo Samuel, or even a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, you're going to see the rewards. He's going to be able to put them in the right situations, and they're going to be able to get the most out of their talent as those creators after the catch and those gadget type players, those short yardage guys that they can take it for a mile. But you've got to have that X guy. Aiyuk's not an X. At least not now. He struggled when he went up against good tight press coverage at Arizona State. So when he was drafted to San Francisco, it was kind of a two-sided thing. I get it, because I know that Kyle Shanahan loves players like this, and especially for a player like Aiyuk who can really stretch the field vertically, Shanahan's going to love this guy. But they still need next, whether it's like Jalen Hurd or whether you're putting George Kittle out wide and on the line of scrimmage or something like that. I think they really need a guy who can step up and play on the line of scrimmage and deal with press coverage to not only open up Brandon Aiyuk, but also allow Deebo Samuel to have a similar year that he did the year before. So when I talk about Brandon Aiyuk, I like it, but it is a situation where I think that San Francisco is still figuring things out, because they need that X guy to really unlock how good Aiyuk can be in this offense.
That's a really interesting point, where like the clear path to playing time might actually be a disadvantage here, because it would be better to have a potential guy outside that draws all that. So that is really intriguing. But if they can find that, I was looking up as you talked to illustrate just how good of a potential fit the after the catch skills would be. 54% of the yards in this offense came after the catch, which is that scheme, which is you already knew, but just again 54%, a pretty whopping number. And 710 yards of Brandon Aiyuk's came after the catch. After the catch, they're third among all draft eligible receivers. 378 of them after contact, which was the most. So I mean, a lot of Deebo Samuel shades, but yes, if he doesn't have that guy drawing the press, drawing that. It could be deadly. Maybe Antonio Brown gets a call. I mean, that would be something.
I don't know, man, because that was something too. Is that Juju Smith-Schuster? He had his real big breakout year when they allowed him to play off the line of scrimmage a lot, and that's when they had Antonio Brown on the team and when they had other guys who could play that X position, like it allowed them to use Smith-Schuster in a lot of different ways. And when Antonio Brown wasn't on the team, it was a little bit different. They still tried to do that as much as they could. But without that player, you could put in line at any time or on the line of scrimmage at any time, it just gets a little bit trickier. And so that's why it's, Deebo Samuel being down, Emmanuel Sanders not there. I know a lot of people are going to look at Brandon Aiyuk and just say like, oh, targets. He's going to be the wide receiver one. He might be, but when I look at this 49ers depth chart, if Jalen Hurd doesn't come back from his injury to be able to play that X role, I don't know who else plays the X, because you got Trent Taylor, you got Dante Pettis, Kendrick Bourne, Chris Thompson, Travis Benjamin. These aren't X receivers.
No.
And so it's just like I'm very intrigued to see how this is going to work out for them.
Indeed. And that kind of wraps up the round one, guys. So I had a few lined up here. Pittman, I know you like KJ Hamler, but I was sticking in my mind. I feel like you said Laviska Shenault was.
I did.
What was he, 3-4 on your list? Like
he was 3. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So I mean, we might have to turn to him for a future question, because that's clearly, definitely above the consensus right now in terms of this rookie class. So, if you don't mind going off script a little bit,
Sure.
what do you like about Laviska Shenault landing in Jaguars, which is an offense that so many seem to be avoiding? What do you like about him there?
I love the fact that they can use him anywhere. And as of right now, DJ Chark obviously had a good season. I think that D.D. Westbrook's a good slot guy. Chris Conley's got some speed to him, but they don't have that go-to offensive weapon. And I think that that's what they're really searching for. Laviska gives them the chance to have that. Obviously he was recovering from the injury over the course of the draft season. So I felt like that knocked him a lot more than it should have for where he got drafted in the second round, because when you look at him, this is a strong receiver who can play on the outside. He could deal with press. He can play on the slot, and he's a good route runner. He's a quick guy that could do what the two-way goes. They played him in the backfield at running back some, and they even used him at wildcat quarterback, right? This was the true X-factor kind of player at Colorado, and if he's healthy, the Jaguars can use him however they want. And I really do just see an opportunity for the Jaguars to use Laviska Shenault in a variety of ways. And that's why, for fantasy purposes, when you get him, let's say, down in the red zone,
right,
this guy becomes their most valuable option easily. Unless Tyler Eifert becomes the Tyler Eifert that we all thought that Tyler Eifert was going to be years ago, in the red zone. But if they don't, shoot, you put this guy in the backfield with Leonard Fournette. You could put him in the slot. You could put him as a running back coming out of the backfield against a mismatched linebacker in the red zone. You could put him out on the end with a safety that's uncomfortable covering in the red zone. And so all of those reasons, the skill set, he's got such an all-around game. And he's not one of those players that I look at where he knows a lot of things, but he's a master of none. The phrase escapes me right now. That's not really how I see Laviska Shenault. I see him as a guy who could truly contribute at a variety of different spots in an offense that's looking for desperately looking for a playmaker that they can go to no matter what the situation is. I think Chark is good, but he's not a situation versatile guy you could go to no matter what.
Really intriguing. I like it. Very compelling case. Certainly someone who I'm probably a little lower on in my rankings, and for no reason other than I haven't been paying attention because he's in Jacksonville. But man, that's a great case right there. I gotta definitely bump him up after hearing that one. Someone I do love, and I do like the landing spot a lot too, is Michael Pittman. Frank Reich, who coached Vincent Jackson, came right out and compared those two. Yeah, they obviously had a bunch of monster seasons together in San Diego, which also was alongside Phillip Rivers, now with the Colts. So man, that would be awesome if Michael Pittman just becomes a Vincent Jackson style player. Do you think that's a fair comparison? And what do you think he does in the short and long term there in Indianapolis there?
Well, Vincent Jackson had a hell of a career, so you don't necessarily want to just be like, oh, he's for sure going to be Vincent Jackson. But in terms of the vision that they have for him, this makes complete sense. We talked before about having a blueprint for guys to start right away. T.Y. Hilton's going to be the field stretcher. He's going to be the speed guy. Paris Campbell's going to be the quick hit player. Michael Pittman's going to be on the outside. He's going to be the big body. He's going to be the short yardage guy. He's going to be the red zone player. When they need something, they're just going to want to throw it up to Michael Pittman. They're going to make it happen. For the longest time now, T.Y. Hilton has been without a consistent complementary player. It's just been T.Y. really carrying that offense. And, I can't remember the win-loss stat that somebody was saying last year, with T.Y. Hilton on the field, they're this record, and without T.Y. Hilton, it's they hadn't won a game without T.Y. Hilton since he got to the Colts, which is wild. But there is such an easy plug and play. This is how you use him vision for Michael Pittman Jr. So I think that's what makes a lot of sense for him. He's got that Vincent Jackson mold. He's more athletic than you would think for a big body player, but he's strong. He can play on the outside. He can deal with press. he's valuable in the money downs. And so when I look at this Colts depth chart, you don't want to say like, oh, he'll for sure be Vincent Jackson, but that's absolutely how they're going to use him.
Very intriguing. Definitely, again, that usage, and he ends up thriving with that type of role. It could be monster numbers just from year one. So
right.
I love it. I love that comparison and the way they're going to try to use him. Let's see if he's up to it, especially as a rookie in the season. That'd be great. And the last guy, I know you've written about him a lot on the draftnetwork.com. I loved reading about him. KJ Hamler, right as you already kind of talked, they're stacking this offense with everything they need around Drew Lock. Even after they go Jerry Jeudy round 1, they still go him in the next round 2. So, what's he kind of bringing to the table? What's their vision for him, and how do you think he'll end up performing in that role?
Speed, man.
Yeah.
And the way he runs his routes, the way he can put his foot in the ground and just boom, like change direction and immediately accelerate to 4.3 flat speed is incredible. I threw on my first game of KJ Hamler. I think it was Ohio State was the very first game that I watched. And you could just tell this kid was different. There was a slant route against Shaun Wade, who Shaun Wade will be a first-round cornerback in the 2021 NFL Draft. I believe that. Where he put his foot on the ground and he smoked Shaun Wade for 96 yards for a touchdown. And it's just like, that's what we're talking about here. So many times when I watched KJ Hamler film throughout the season, he's lined up in the slot off the line of scrimmage so he doesn't have to deal with press because he's tiny. But you're watching and you're seeing, because the defense knows that Hamler's going to line up 1 or 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage and they can't get their hands on him. Instead, the only way that they have a prayer of containing him is if they're playing like 8 yards back. If they give themselves an 8-yard cushion on this guy, because he will eat it up very quickly, and then he's going to have them turned around, flip their hips the wrong way, and he's just going to make things happen. Biggest thing for KJ Hamler is getting his hands consistent. He can't have the drops that he had in college, and that including like comes through catching through contact as well as the focus drops. Like they have got to improve there. The Denver fit is interesting because it just depends what they want to do with Jerry Jeudy, because I think Jeudy would be a very successful two-way player if you use him in the slot a lot. That's really the only place you can use Hamler, if you ask me. Like, Hamler can't be a pseudo outside receiver guy that you use versatily and you put him out to the line of scrimmage. He's just, I just don't think that he's really best there unless you're just straight running a 9 route with him and telling you, hey, beat the guy on the outside. So Jeudy can play on the outside. It just brings up a very I just wonder how high they are on Hamler. Like, did this team draft Hamler and we're like, we are playing this guy right away? Like, this guy is going to be the vision that we had of Deshaun Hamilton. We're putting this guy in the slot right away, and he's going to make things happen. Because if they do, then you're going to get Jerry Jeudy more as an outside receiver, which isn't a bad thing. He can handle it. It's just not as advantageous as maybe him really being able to cook slot defenders with two-way goes. I just wonder how high they are on Hamler. That's what I think of him. You could see the clear speed. He plays at a different level. He's at a different gear than so many other guys in college football. The hands have got to get better, but in terms of the route running, how he's able to really smoke people, that's where he wins.
Oh man, that just like the vision of, two beasts on the outside and then Hamler with that speed with a slot corner on him is just like, ooh, that got to get you excited there. I absolutely love that. And again, Drew Lock, how high is he going to take him? It could be one of those offenses that just becomes a monster if Lock is up to the task. We've now covered 9 of these, again, record 13 wide receivers to go in the first 2 rounds. So we're not going to have time to hit every single one, but I'm just going to quickly lay out kind of the cases I've seen for the other ones. And then if there's 1 or 2 that you're like, yeah, I got to respond to it, then feel free.
Sure.
One of them would be Denzel Mims. No team vacated more air yards than the Jets. 2,031 right there. Air yard percents was over half. So there's certainly a ton of volume up for grabs. We got a guy that's 6'3", 4'3", 840, so he could help fill that void. You mentioned Chase Claypool. The Steelers have a pretty solid track record of identifying these wide receivers. Another absolute specimen, 6'4", 4'4", 240, 40.5-inch vertical. I mean, just an athletic freak by a team that tends to figure out how to use those guys the best. You got T. Higgins, you mentioned, was also in your top 10 wide receivers. he was the highest draft capital there. I mean, it's a bit congested. You got AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, Auden Tate, but still, if they go out and get him at 33 overall, they clearly have something in mind for him. And the last one taken was Van Jefferson on a Sean McVay offense that has been one of the more lethal passing attacks, even though they took a little step back last year. They also lose Brandon Cooks. He's certainly got some quality route running, some good footwork. So, 4 intriguing guys. Is there one of those guys that stands out the most to you?
Well, I'll just I can hit on all 4 of them real quick. Certainly Denzel Mims, he's in a situation where he's going to become Sam Darnold's best friend, right? He has to be. If they're going to figure things out, they've got to be able to get it going really quick. Situation for him to succeed early, I mean, it couldn't be any better right now for Denzel Mims. You talked about the wide receivers that they're losing. Chase Claypool, we mentioned earlier, Juju Smith-Schuster, they were able to utilize him the best when they could use him as a flanker, have him in motion behind the line of scrimmage, use him in the slot, things like that. Chase Claypool allows them to have that opportunity because he could play as an X, but the plus that he's giving you as an X is he's a freak athlete. So it's like, it's not just like they're sticking Chase Claypool out there because he's 6'4". I mean, this guy runs a 4.2, 440. He's got a 40-inch vert, and so it's wild the advantage that you have with playing Chase Claypool as an X. I think it's a double positive for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Higgins, mentioned this before. You talked about the crowded room as of right now. They know they're losing A.J. Green. They know that this is the last year that A.J. Green is going to be a Cincinnati Bengal. That's the role. They're going to have him learn behind A.J. Green. They're going to have him trained to run those kinds of routes. He's going to be the next guy in for an A.J. Green kind of player. And I think that moving forward, you're going to see it be T. Higgins, Auden Tate, and then Tyler Boyd from 2021 on. But that's what I think of that situation. Van Jefferson, man, we saw what we saw what Sean McVay was able to do with Cooper Kupp and just how he was able to place him as one of the best slot receivers in the NFL now. Van Jefferson will cook you with his routes. Like, he is a route running technician. And I think that Sean McVay really loves these kinds of players because I've never been as high on Jared Goff individually as what it seems like a lot of other people are. Even when the Rams went to the Super Bowl, like, I've always thought Jared Goff has been orchestrated by Sean McVay to succeed.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think Jared Goff can succeed outside of, not like no coach can use him, but the reason why he has had nearly as much success as he has is because of Sean McVay. I fully believe that. Van Jefferson is another kind of player which McVay can scheme up to create manufactured separation that makes Goff's job easier, which I think is really, really important, because if you don't do that, I think you've got a really limited quarterback. And so I think that they're going to utilize Van Jefferson a lot because they know that they have to, because of the guy who's throwing them the ball. Now, with that all said, mix that up, have Sean McVay be the chef of it. You can have a pretty good offense, and I think Jefferson could have a really good rookie year because he is pro ready right now to do what he needs to do.
Very intriguing takes on all those guys, and just got to mention too, T. Higgins is the heir apparent, but AJ Green has also missed all of last year, only played 9 games the year before. If this guy is on the back 9 and takes an injury, maybe T. Higgins does have that kind of second half explosion. So even still worth a stash, and depending on how deep the benches are. The last one I have for you, and I think I know your answer based on the rankings you gave earlier, but is there a guy who didn't go in those first 2 rounds that you could see being kind of like the next Terry McLaurin, where he fell, but then ends up still being kind of a monster despite other guys having the draft pedigree? And I remember there's a name I heard on that list of the top 10. Is that your answer?
Yeah, Bryan Edwards, the wide receiver out of South Carolina. He was the first pick in the 3rd round, so this isn't exactly going on a bold prediction. I'll tell you, if he was able to work out at the combine, I mean, he'd have been a top 2 round pick no matter what. He broke records at South Carolina, I think, for the most consecutive catches. I mean, he was a stud under crap quarterback play, man. And he is a true outside receiver that gives you plus abilities everywhere. Like, he is a guy who can handle press coverage. He's 6'3", 225 pounds. He's got way more athleticism than you would think, and he would have shown that off at the combine. And if Bryan Edwards could have worked out at the combine, I think he suffered a foot injury. That's why he couldn't do anything. He couldn't do that or couldn't work out at a pro day. Well, COVID-19 ruined all pro days anyway. Yeah. So I think that if he was able to work out at the combine, he would be way more on people's radar as like a, hey, I really like this guy. Watch out for this guy. Basically, this exact question of these sleepers, everyone's answer would be Bryan Edwards if he could have worked out at the combine, because I think that he brings so much more athleticism than people expect for his size. He's a guy who can play as a true X. He can play off the line of scrimmage as well. He's a slot mismatch. He's kind of like that big slot mismatch kind of player. And again, he made chicken salad out of chicken poop, if you will, from South Carolina's quarterbacks over the last couple of years. And so I'm a big Bryan Edwards fan. I think that he's going to have a really nice career.
Make sure to take his name down, folks. Bryan Edwards, absolutely. We got a couple minutes here left. You ready to run through the quick no-huddle offense that we do with all the fantasy wolves we have on?
Yes,
Let's do it.
I'm ready for this.
Awesome. So, again, it works out that it's a gut reaction. Whoever comes to mind as I do it, just kind of fill in the blank, because I know you'd play a bunch of fantasy, so I'm excited to hear your takes on this. Okay. Number 1, after McCaffrey, the number 2 player in draft should be...
It's got to be Saquon. It's got to be Saquon Barkley.
That one's too easy. I gotta rewrite that one. Everybody says Saquon. Too easy. The next Dalvin Cook or round 2 running back who ends up going top 5 in 2021 will be?
It depends where he goes, because I've seen some ADPs where Joe Mixon is like 11, 12, 13. And so, again, like that's a little bit cheating, because if he goes in the second round, I think that your league's trash. But the other name, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Is the other one, and he's a guy who I'll answer with a different question later on these, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire would be another one.
Looking forward to it. Do you have a favorite fantasy team name that you've either had or seen before?
Okay, so one of my friends has done Redhead Redemption because I believe Andy Dalton was their quarterback, so that's a great one. But the best one that I've ever seen is someone saying, one carry-on, like Carry-On Johnson, it's one carry-on, one personal item. Like when you go through the airport, that's fantastic. That's the best one I've ever seen. That's incredible.
I got to steal that one. That one is unbelievable. That one carry-on. That is great. Who do you think the next Chris Godwin, kind of round 4 or 5 receiver who then explodes into the elite will be?
Okay, again, this is all like subjective depending on like how your drafts go. So I just went off some average draft position ones that I was seeing. I think Marquise Brown's a candidate here because I watched him bulk up this year to really handle contact better. He's up to like 180, 185, and he looks solid. He's been putting in a lot of work this offseason. And the guy other than Marquise Brown, I would say, is Will Fuller. It's a huge year for Will Fuller, right? I mean, if Will Fuller is healthy with no DeAndre Hopkins there, the world is his oyster, right? I mean, like, he could absolutely be one of the top 5 tight ends in 2020 if he stays healthy.
100%. Who do you think 2020's Mark Andrews or breakout tight end will be?
I'll say Jonnu Smith. I just did an article about Jonnu Smith. I think the Tennessee Titans love him. He's got clear pathway to be in their tight end 1. He's a versatile player. You can use in the backfield. You can use him as a wing guy. You could use him on the line. Tennessee's big fans of him. And who's a tight end who just left?
Delaney Walker?
Yes, yeah. Delaney Walker, now no longer in the picture at all. Jonnu Smith was kind of starting to take over during last season, but now it's all Jonnu Smith. So we'll see what he could really do.
Do you have a most hated NFL player for a fantasy-specific reason?
I feel bad. It's 100% either Tyler Eifert or Jordan Reed, just because I continue to draft them every year. And I feel so bad for them because it's not their fault that they're hurt. But, like, I drafted these guys, and in my mind, I was like, if I just get Tyler Eifert back, if I just get Jordan Reed back, I'm going to make the playoff push. Everything's going to be good. And it, like, never happened. Yeah. So I don't want to say hated, but those are the guys who have definitely let me down the most.
If there was somehow another Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, it would be?
So are you saying, like guys who like rise up the ranks to just like dominate fantasy?
Yeah, exactly. Like a breakout QB that just dominates and is a cheat code.
So I got 2 answers. One, if we get the Matthew Stafford that we had at the beginning of last year for the full season, I mean, he's going to carry teams, no doubt about it. He was the best quarterback in the NFL through the month of November. I mean, he pushed the ball at an unreal rate. And then the other one is Carson Wentz, like we talked about before with the Eagles. If that offense stays fully healthy, why not believe that Carson Wentz can't have some sort of a near MVP type of season with the offense around him?
Love both guys there. Do you have an early rounder, first or second round, that you think is going to bust the hardest?
Oh man, I'm gonna catch crap for this. I would say Michael Thomas, because I know that Michael Thomas is getting drafted sometimes in the top 5, in the top 7. Look, man, they've got Sanders now, who's the best wide receiver 2 they've ever had, and I went over Jared Cook's film last year. That dude's good. Okay, like he is good, and it is nothing against Michael Thomas, and so it's almost weird to say a bust. I just don't think he's going to be that guaranteed target dominator and like 20 points every single game like he was last year, because there's so much better talent around him. They really didn't even utilize Jared Cook until the last 6-8 games of the season, and now they throw in Emmanuel Sanders in that mix. And so I'll say Michael Thomas won't be worth the draft spot if you got to draft him that early.
And I gotta just say that Jared Cook article is absolutely fantastic. Anyone who has any doubts about Jared Cook, make sure you check out the Draft Network, because it is a fantastic piece. And he was tight end 3 for that stretch that you just said. So yeah. I'm all about that one as well. What about, who do you think gained kind of the most fantasy value during this 2020 offseason?
Oh, Austin Eckler. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. No, them moving on from Melvin Gordon, them giving Austin Eckler the big deal, and apparently, if you haven't seen the pictures yet,
Holy
him
shit.
turning into an absolute superhero body. The dude's, there's nobody who I think has gained as much fantasy value as that guy has, especially because he's a PPR monster, Right.
It's kind of shades of that Christian McCaffrey year where he was still kind of round 2, got fucking huge. Yeah. And now, It could be. I mean, he's got that skill set. Not Christian McCaffrey, but I mean, maybe damn close. Conversely, who do you think lost the most fantasy value?
Michael Thomas. I'll just say that again, just because the amount of just fantasy value that Michael Thomas has had over the last couple of years, I think has been crazy. I'm tempted to see what DeAndre Hopkins' fantasy value is now, because now he's in a room with, I still think he's going to get a ton of shares, but Larry Fitzgerald's still on the team. I know they're still trying to work in Christian Kirk. There's Andy Isabella. There's other wide receivers on that team that they could be mixing in. And so I'm just interested to see what it's like, because, before he was just getting force-fed by Deshaun Watson all the time. Right. And so Michael Thomas for sure. Interested to see what happens with DeAndre Hopkins. Although I still think, I want to make this clear, those dudes are ballers. Like, they're great talents, but the amount of fantasy points they've been able to put up over the last couple of years.
You won't leave those middle rounds, kind of 5 through 6, 7, without getting which player?
You brought him up earlier in the podcast, and according to the average draft position that I looked up, if Jonathan Taylor is there, I'm picking Jonathan Taylor, absolutely. The other two that I thought of, because I saw them around that same neighborhood, Odell. I'm going to pick up Odell if he is still there. I have no idea. And then I saw Gronkowski's name down in that range, and look, man, I understand that he didn't play football last year, but Brady is his quarterback again. He's going to score touchdowns. That's the way that it's going to be. And so it's a super crowded room, but I'm taking my chance on Brady continuing to feed Gronk in the end zone.
Love it. Do you ever play the board game Settlers of Catan?
Yes, I do. Now,
yes, you're the first one out of 20, by the way. But yes, keep going.
I got into Settlers of Catan 4 or 5 years ago, so I actually have not played it in probably 2 to 3 years. I know everybody's into it now, it's a phone game, right? Everybody can play with other people on their phone. I actually haven't played the phone version, but I was known. I'm infamous among my friend group as hoarding sheep. I'm just a
shepherd
hoarder,
over there.
And I make a monopoly out of the sheep market. I make everybody come through me if they want any sheep. So that's how I play Settlers of Catan.
I love it. The shepherd Sikkema over there. That's fantastic. I love it. Who do you think the next sophomore wide receiver after or even before A.J. Brown should be in fantasy drafts?
I'd tell you it's Marquise Brown, again, because of what we touched on earlier. The body transformation. Lamar Jackson seems to be talking him up big time. He's going to continue to hit him deep, and we know that he's going to be a dynamic weapon for him. If he can handle physicality more, maybe they'll shorten up the route tree with him. Maybe they'll give him stuff over the middle all the time and things like that. And so I really think that there's a chance for him to shine.
Love it. Do you prefer target hogs or workhorse backs?
Target hogs. I'm always looking for the latest target share guy. Obviously, workhorse backs, if you can find one, they're gonna be a steady Eddie for your team. And every championship team, I feel needs some at least one workhorse back. But I'm definitely looking at targets more I am carries.
Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Austin Eckler were all top 5 running backs in the last 3 years that went after round 7. Who do you think that'll be in 2019?
All right, I've got 2 bold ones that I'll go with. If Zach Moss is healthy, I feel like he is what Buffalo wants in a running back. And I think that anytime that they get within the 5-yard line, it's just going to be all Zach Moss. He's got great balance through contact. He's a great short yardage guy, and he'll give you some plus athleticism and some burst in that as well. The other guy's Matt Breida, who I really like. He goes to a situation in Miami where they have the chance to utilize him a lot as a pass catcher, as a running back out of the backfield, potentially as a guy that they swing out to maybe a receiver position. I don't know. I just know that Matt Breida's got a lot of speed and he's got a lot of versatility. So I'll go out on a limb with those 2 names.
Do you have any ideal league settings that you follow?
So I'll just share this. I'm in a hybrid dynasty league right now, which has been a lot of fun. It's a 12-person league. 5 years ago, we did like an inaugural draft where everybody was in the pool and we all drafted everybody. But the rules of the league are you keep 3 players every year. So it's not quite like it's not like a full keeper, and it's also not like a 1-person keeper. You keep 3. 2 of them can be anybody you want. Any position, doesn't matter. 1 of them has to be a rookie. So a rookie from the previous season. And so it's really cool because you get to keep that team identity that you often go with, but you only keeping 3 guys still means the redraft is cool and you like that. And then obviously like the rookie aspect of it, it really like focuses on you having a rookie on your roster and you betting on a rookie and maybe drafting one early in the redraft. And so that's a fun little thing that we've been doing the last couple of years. I really enjoy it.
I love that idea. That's fantastic for all the reasons you said. After Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams, owners should draft who at wide receiver?
Oh, Julio Jones. I'm drafting Julio Jones almost before any of them. Julio is going to dominate, man. They're going to force feed that man the ball. I know he's got a narrative of like, oh, like he doesn't really score touchdowns. That's Julio's thing. Look, if Dan Quinn and general manager Thomas Dimitroff don't win this year, they are out. They're gone. They're going to look at Julio Jones and say, we are running every single thing that we do through you. They've got no Austin Hooper. Their running back room is, who knows at this point? The offensive line's still coming together. If Matt Ryan wants to survive past this year with the staff that he has, they better just be throwing that bad boy up to Julio Jones. And I'd be taking Julio Jones wide receiver 1, honestly.
Wow. Love it. Love that. Blank was the most important coaching move for fantasy, specifically for which guy's value?
Okay, this one is interesting. I peeked at this question when you sent it to me. I like Joe Brady going to Carolina for DJ Moore and for Curtis Samuel. And the reason I think Curtis Samuel, I guess, more because, people at LSU, they remember the big shots, right? Joe Burrow chucking it deep down the field, them being so dynamic, them scoring in 2 seconds. But it was really the intricacies of how they put stress on a defense with the RPO game that really is how LSU was able to create those deep shots. And so, combining an RPO with a little slant route from the slot that really put stress on the linebacker or the safety that was coming down. Joe Brady knew all that from LSU. And so in order for Brady to really succeed early on as a rookie offensive coordinator, he's going to have to utilize that a lot. And so I think that those short yardage players are actually going to be at a premium in Joe Brady's offense. I really like him for both DJ Moore and for Curtis Samuel.
Love it. Do running backs matter? Last 3 here.
Running backs do matter. You just need to be careful how much you are paying them in second contracts. That's all I would say. Yeah, I think that running backs definitely do matter. Running backs obviously matter a shit ton for fantasy, but I would say that it is often more advantageous for you to pick up a new running back every 4 years instead of paying them a higher price, just because you can get good ones in the second and third round. And if you're getting good ones in that round, you're not paying them a lot of money for the next couple of years. You can use your cap space elsewhere for pass catchers or tight ends, offensive linemen, pass rushers, things like that.
What is the funniest last place punishment or side bet that you've either witnessed or unfortunately been a part of?
I haven't been part of any ones that are too cruel. The ones that are the most cruel, I always feel like, are the relegation ones. Like, people love to have that relegation format where let's say you're in a league of 10 people, but really you wanted to get more friends involved. You didn't want 14, you didn't want 16 because that's too big of a league. You strap 4 other people on there and you have 2 leagues of 10, right? And the top 2, and like the person who wins the bottom league and the person who finishes last place in the top league switch places and you get relegated. If I get relegated in any league, I'm quitting. I'm not playing a year of fantasy football for nothing. I'm not doing it. No, absolutely. Like, you could find somebody new to play in the league. I'm absolutely not doing that. And then, like, to that point, God, I'm trying to remember what the format is, but basically the story of it was the whole league for the draft shows up. I think the way that this was put up is there are 13 people in the league, but it's a 12-man league. So one person doesn't play every single year. And the person who picks who isn't playing is the person who won the league the previous season. And they choose, the story that I heard, they choose that person on draft night. So they'll show up at like a Buffalo Wild Wings, all 13 of them, and you don't know if you're not about to draft, like you're not about to be in the league for the year. And then the person who won the league the previous year literally selects somebody that night to not be in the league anymore for a full season.
I'm going to have nightmares all weekend just of that situation unfolding.
So
that
cruel,
is
man.
As cruel as can be. Oh, the draft night, too.
Yes.
Oh, that's probably the most painful thing I've ever heard. And the last one here, you kind of previewed it, so I cannot wait to hear this. Your boldest 2020 fantasy prediction, and then just remind our listeners where they can connect and kind of find your work.
Boldest fantasy prediction is that Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be a top 5 fantasy running back in 2020. This guy, I think, is going to be a star. His hands are fantastic. He gives all his effort in blocking. You never have to take him off the field for those 2 reasons. He's already got great vision. He's a shifty runner. He can give you those dynamic runs. I think that he's going to be completely durable due to how he's built. I think he's perfect. You put him in that Chiefs offense, it's going to be so hard to stop them. I think that he is going to be a top 5 back in all of fantasy football in 2020. You find him my work over at thedraftnetwork.com. On Twitter, doing all kinds of tomfoolery at Tampa Bay Trey. Yeah, man, again, it's always a pleasure being with you. Really enjoyed this podcast.
100%. And for the record, too, I just moved Clyde Edwards-Helaire just the night before above Alvin Kamara to running back 5 in my rankings. So I am 1,000% in agreement, man. But yes, it's always a blast to have you on. Thank you so much for the time today, Trevor. We really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your weekend, brother.
Of course, man. You too.